Hello, I'm Liselle Sambury. I'm a traditionally published author, and welcome to this video about how I got my third and fourth book deals. So, a bit wild. It's been a bit of a wild ride in the last little while, but one of these that I'm talking about today hadn't been announced yet, and so I was waiting for that to come around so that I could make this video and kind of pair those two deals together. And when I'm talking about these book deals, I want to say that this is a little bit different than my previous book deal video. So if you look at my links in the description, I have links to how I got my first book deal and how I got my second book deal. And those were cases in which I wrote books. I wrote a book and me and my agent went on submission with it. It sold to a publisher and there it was. So I had worked on a book for a period of time, edited it, did all this stuff, and then we presented it and then it was sold. And so that's how my first two book deals came about. In the case of these next two book deals, it was very different. So I did not actively do anything to make these book deals happen. I was approached for both of these. And so that makes it a little bit different than my other ones. But I thought it would be fun to talk about them because they are sort of different deals. And I do think it would be interesting for people, hopefully, to hear about the different kind of ways that book deals can come to you as a traditionally published author. And so that is what this video is all about. And I will be talking about how I got into the short story anthology, All These Sunken Souls, and how I ended up writing a He-Man book. So that's what this video is going to encompass. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with talking about my third book deal. So this was for me to be a contributor to the short story anthology, All These Sunken Souls, being edited by Circe Moskowitz, who is a contributing author to the Reclaim the Stars anthology. And it's coming out from Chicago Review Press sometime in 2023. I'm unaware exactly of when at this point. I think maybe more towards fall, but I'm not 100%, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, that's the third book deal that I'm going to talk about. I will link down below All These Sunken Souls on GOODREADS so that you can, check off Want to Read if you want, because I'm going to have a story in there. So yes, so how did this come about? So in January 2021, January 7th, 2021 to be specific, because I had to look back at my emails, I got an email from Christy, who is my literary agent, saying that she had been contacted by Circe's literary agent to ask if I wanted to contribute to this anthology, that it was going to be an anthology of horror stories from Black authors, and yeah, that was what it was going to be. And did I want to participate? Was I interested in that? Because they were going to put this project on submission. And so they were wanting to confirm authors that would be part of the anthology for it to go on submission. So it had not sold or anything at this point. They were just readying it for submission. And so I didn't know Circe personally. I had interacted with her, I think, a few times on Twitter, on social media in some way. So I was familiar with her, like I had seen her tweets and things like that. And I knew that she had like a reputable agent. And so I was aware of her existence and we had interacted in some way, but we weren't like friends or anything like that. To kind of give you an idea of like my connection background to the editor, the author that's editing the collection. And so it was really like out of the blue for me. Like I didn't know this was happening. I didn't know anything was going on. I just got, contacted about it and I was like, oh, okay. I thought that was exciting, an anthology of Black horror stories. And I was like, yeah, 100%. I would love to contribute to that. So then from there, what happened is they were kind of like, well, do you have a pitch that you can put together for what your short story is going to be about. And so then I very quickly had to come up with a pitch about what my short story was going to be like. And at the time I had kind of like a nightmare, and I thought it would be good as a short story. I will say right now, that's not the story I ended up writing, but that was the story I pitched. And so that went off to Cersei and went off to her agent as well, and then all of that got sent off to submission, and from there was very out of mind, something out of mind, out of sight, out of mind. In that, you know, I wasn't on submission for it, so I wasn't seeing, you know, passes or rejections or anything like that. It was just kind of like, oh, so I'm in this anthology that's on submission, and maybe it'll sell and maybe it won't. We'll see. And so, yeah, I basically, you know, out of sight, out of mind. It rolls off the tongue now. Anyway, so that was what happened. And then in September 2021, got an email from Cersei saying that Chicago Review Press had purchased the anthology, and could I still contribute to it? Because it was going to move forward. And that was kind of like how it became a book deal, essentially. And so I think it was around that time where I was like, yes, I'd like to contribute. P.S. Can I change my story idea? And Cersei was like, yeah, 100%. And so I had sent that new idea that she was excited for, so that everything was fine. Yeah. And then the contract came through. In case of, you know, the short story anthology contract is a shorter contract, not as large as like my full book contracts. But as usual, I did send it to my literary agent, Christy, to look over, as well as me looking over it, just because she is the expert. And she also consulted with other agents in the agency just to help double check to make sure there wasn't anything we had missed. And then we went back with edits to Chicago Review Press. Edits were made to the contract, and then I signed it, and then there was a third book deal, which was really wild for me because, again, my previous book deals had been things that I had like very actively worked on for a period of time to get to, versus this felt very passive in that it came to me and then it went out on submission. I wasn't really involved, and then it just popped up and it was like, yep, it's sold, and now here we go from here. So yeah, so that was the third book deal. And now we're on to the fourth book deal, which is a He-Man book. So that was also very, very wild, but we are going to talk about that one too. It's a middle grade book series published by Abrams, and the IP is owned by Mattel, so it's like a partnership between them. And yeah, so it's a series of books. So there is a Netflix series called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And so that series, it's basically a companion to that. So the novels follow the trajectory of the series, but they are additional stories that aren't included in the show. So you're getting extra material from the books. And I wrote the third book in the series. The first two books were written by Gregory Moan. He wrote the one that was centered around He-Man, and then he's also written I, Skeletor, which is like a Skeletor focused book, and then I'm writing the third book, which is a Teela focused book. At the time that I'm making this video, we haven't finalized the title, so I'm sorry that I won't say the title because I'm not sure what it is yet, but it is the third book in that series, and it follows Teela. Teela is a hand witch, a sorcerer. In the show, she's one of the main characters, and so I was approached to write her story, and that is how this fourth book deal came about. So on December 2nd, 2021, I got an email, yet another email from my agent Christy, saying, hey, so these people at Abrams want to know if you would like to write a He-Man book from the perspective of this character named Teela. It's a show on Netflix. The first season is up right now. What do you think? And it would be a middle grade. And so if you followed me on this channel, you might be aware that I previously tried to write a middle grade and had a big old fail and was like, I suck at this. I'm not good at it. I can't. And so I put my middle grade hat down and I was like, I don't know, we'll see. So that was the state I was in. And we got this email. And so I said to Christy, I was like, let me watch this show and see what I think, and like see if this is in any way something I even have a sliver of interest in. Because if I go and I watch the show and I hate it, it isn't gonna matter, right? I'm not gonna do the project if I hate the show. So I sat down on the couch and I went to Netflix and I started watching the show. And I really liked it. I thought it was really fun. And so Tila as a main character, she's like the first person that shows up on the show. And I thought she was so cool. Like, it was just awesome to see like a black girl who's like a powerful witch, and like she's stealing the sword of power, and then she kind of hears a voice in her head that kind of says don't do that she ends up listening to. And so she's kind of a villain in the beginning, and she turns tail on that and she becomes one of the good guys. And so I really liked that. I thought it was cool. I thought the He-Man transformation sequences in the show was really awesome. It was very like, I love a transformation sequence. I just do. Like, Sailor Moon, Card Captors, Mew Mew Power, that one's a little bit of a deep cut. Like, Digimon, I love a transformation sequence. I really do. And I thought it was so cool. It was really, really cool. And I was like, oh, I like this. And I also very quickly, because originally I was like, why would you approach me about that? Like, I'm so confused. I was like, I've never once tweeted and been like, I'm a huge He-Man fan or anything like that. But when I was watching it and watching this character Tila, who is a hand witch, who is a sorcerer, watching her, and then they were in this, on this planet, on this futuristic planet with advanced technology, and that's when it clicked. And I was like, I see where we're coming from. Because they had talked about reading Blood Like Magic, and Blood Like Magic is an urban fantasy with sci-fi elements. So it's about a family of witches who live in the near future. And so there's a mixture of magic and technology. And so once I had seen the show, I was like, I get it. I totally understand where the thought process went from this is our show to this is a person we think who can write this book. And like, from the way that they had, talked about pitching and asking me to participate in this, I had a lot of confidence in my ability to write this story, which was also like very flattering. So once I had done that, I was like, okay, I'd totally be interested in this. Also because I think my struggle in the past with middle grade is that I find that the voice that I have when I write middle grade tends to be a little bit older. So it tends to be more on the, 14, 13 kind of segment than on like, middle grade that is a little bit more geared towards kids that are maybe closer to like 7, 8 range. And so I think that was where I struggled in my book because I wasn't sure how that should all fit together. But in watching the show, it did have an older middle grade feel to it. And so that also made me feel more confident that I could write something like that because it was in a voice, and the way the characters talked, the way they interacted with each other, it felt like something that was very feasible for me as an author. So upon deciding that, I was like, okay, so I'm interested. I would like to do this. And then I emailed my agent and I was like, do they think that I somehow know a lot about He-Man? Because I was like, I'm not like a He-Man expert. I was like, of course, for doing an IP, I'll learn a bunch of things, which I've learned a lot of stuff, but I'll learn a bunch of things. I'll really get in depth with the character. I'll get in depth with the show and the source material and all of that. But I am not currently a person that knows a bunch about He-Man in, is that okay? And because I was like, I don't want to say yes, and then somehow it comes out of the woodwork that they thought that I was like a decades-long fan or something. And so it was really good. So we had that conversation. They were like, no, by no means are expecting you to be an expert or anything like that. But we're still interested in having you write the book. And so at that point I was like, let's do it, let's do it. Let's write this book. So that was kind of the first step in that process. Sorry, I lied. That was not the first step. So I had expressed to my agent that I wanted to do it, but then I was worried about non-compete clause with Simon & Schuster. So the way that it was structured, I was pretty sure that I was allowed to write this other book with them, but we wanted to kind of double check and make sure that everything was going to be pretty much good on both sides. And so then my agent contacted my editor Sarah at SNS to kind of be like, hey, this is what we've got going on, and how does that work out with everything? And so from that discussion, because of the dates that they were originally looking for publishing the He-Man book, we did talk about flexibility with the dates, just so that that release date could be farther away from my release date of Delicious Monsters, which is my book that I have coming out with Margaret K. McElderry on February 28th, 2023. So because I had that book coming out, and originally the He-Man book, they were looking to put it in spring, then I would have had 2 books out in the same season, which we didn't super want. So then we asked if the He-Man book could be pushed into summer, and that way it would give it a little bit more distance for me. The release dates wouldn't be so close together, and so I could focus on one book, and then I could then focus on the other book for promotion wise, just to kind of spread them out. And so that was something that we had to talk about. So then Christy went back to the team, said, yes, we're interested. How about these dates, and how can we move these dates? And so that ended up being part of the process, is kind of deciding how those dates were going to be, which was a new thing for me because I hadn't expected to have a bunch of stuff out in 2023. And so then now we were kind of moving around, but all of it was very, very like totally cool, easygoing, super amicable. And then that was kind of decided on. And then we ended up actually doing a few things before the contract came in. I also got early access to episodes so that I could watch them ahead of time, so that I could write the books. I was able to meet with the Mattel team and with Abrams, with my editor there, and also Gregory Moan, who wrote the first 2 books, just to talk all about the process and like how it is working with Mattel and working with Abrams and like doing He-Man stuff in the world and that whole process. It was really good for me because it really gave me confidence in the whole process. I got to ask a lot of questions about how things would go about. And yeah, it was really a really positive experience. It was great to really feel like they were really committed to making sure I was comfortable with everything that was happening. And then I later came up with 3 ideas to pitch for what I thought the book could be about. We ended up talking with the Mattel team. I shared my pitches first with my editor at Abrams, and then I shared my pitches largely with Mattel, and from there we coalesced and we came together on one book idea. I will talk more about this in a separate video. I'm kind of waiting until the whole editorial process goes through so that I can talk about the whole process, because this is an IP project, so it's an intellectual property project. He-Man is obviously not my original idea, and I don't own the rights to it, and so I'm writing that book as an IP sort of project, and that's different than doing my own original work, my own original IP. And so I will do a video down the line talking about that whole process, but I thought I'd share that little tidbit of how that went now for this little book deal video. And then eventually the contract came in and I signed the contract, and there was the 4th book deal. Yeah, wild stuff. If you had talked to me even a year ago, to be like, is it a year ago? No, it's not a year ago yet. December 2021 is not a year ago yet. But like, if you had asked me a year ago, if you had told me a year ago that I'd be writing a He-Man book, I'd be like, what? But yeah, writing a He-Man book. And so, yes, this is very important. So the secret middle grade project that I have been working on, that I've included in and I've talked about in some vlogs, is this project. This is the secret middle grade project. So I will link a description below, in the description below, a playlist of me working on the secret middle grade project, which you now know is the third He-Man book, is Tila's book. So that's what that project has been, and I've had a really positive experience doing it. IP so far is like pretty fun. It's like, it does feel like writing fan fiction, weirdly, but like fan fiction in which you're talking directly to the creator, and like, or the creators or people that are writing the source material, and like getting their input from it. It's like a weird collaborative fan fiction. So yeah, been a very fun process, and that is the fourth book deal. So that was the third and fourth book deals. And I do, as a preview secret, I will have a video about my fifth and sixth book deals, but those things have not been announced yet, so I cannot be talking about them, so that will have to wait. But know that those are things that are coming out on the horizon. So yeah, when I say it's been a wild ride, it really has. And if you're wondering why I cut down my videos to spend more time on my writing, this is why. But all amazing things. I think for me, what really stood out about these experiences was that, you know, the benefit of having my work published and out in the world. Like, as I talked about, you know, the He-Man deal had come about from Blood Like Magic being on their radar. I don't really know how that anthology with Cersei came about. I'm not really sure what made her pop up on her radar. Maybe that was just kind of being around and present. But once you have your book out, people can read your work, and you know, people might read your work and think, oh, I would love to do this project with her or that project with her. I know some people also on like Twitter, etc., will be very vocal about like IP projects or anthologies or things they might want to be a part of, to kind of also nudge that into the world and say to people, hey, I would be interested in doing this. For my part, I did also contact Christy kind of early on, I think when Blood Like Magic was on submission, early on in my career, to say that I would be interested and open to doing IP projects, that I would just kind of want to see what came in and decide from there. And I did in fact have a kind of IP pitch that came into me that I ended up saying no to, because it didn't feel like something that I wanted to write or something that was really for me, which in itself is a privilege, because there are some authors who may end up writing things that they aren't really that interested in because they need to make a living, and I'm not ever going to begrudge authors for getting their coin, so that's not really my personality. But in my case, just with like projects I had going on, I was like, I don't really think this is a project for me, but I would love to see, you know, if this person has projects in the future, I would love to see what those are and have those come through to me. And so I've expressed a lot of kind of interest to my agent and a lot of enthusiasm when things come in and I can't really do them. There was another IP project that had come in that I just like, I was really interested in it, and it would have been so fun to do, but I didn't have time. Like, by the time it had come through, I already had like the maximum number of things on my plate, and I was just like, I can't. But yeah, so it's been kind of wild in that way. It's been a very when it rains it pours sort of thing. When it comes to those for me, which I know is not for everyone, so I do also feel very like grateful that those things have been coming into me. But yeah, and then anthologies, things like that, I found that anthology things have really happened more through contacts, through people that I've known in the writing community, not in the case of Cersei. Well, I know I did know her in some respects. It's just we weren't like super close or anything, but I did know I had interacted with her. We were aware of each other. So I do think those things come about. I don't know that I don't actively network really. Like, I think of me being on social media and interacting with other authors. To me, that's just interacting with other authors because I love writing and I love being in the writing community and I love talking to other authors and writers, and so I just naturally do that with people. So I don't know, I guess it's a very passive networking. I'm not really, what I'm trying to say is I'm not going out to people like, I think maybe one day you do an anthology that I'd be interested in, so let's like hang out and be friends. I'm not doing that. I'm just really passively created connections, and then sometimes those opportunities have come up in that way. But I also know that something a lot of anthologies have been doing, which I think is really awesome and has been really great too, is that they offer this last slot and they do like a short story competition. And so you can submit your short story in competition to the anthology, and then it might be picked to be in the anthology. In that case, it's not really knowing anyone or being on anyone's radar or even having published work out there. It's just kind of like you write the best short story you can and you submit it, and if it resonates with them for the collection, for the anthology, then that's a way for you to get into the anthology. So that is what I will say about anthologies, in case of, as like a, you can make this happen for you, is that to definitely keep a lookout when anthologies are announced to see if they have slots like that are available, because that can be a really wonderful opportunity for you to get into an anthology. So, editing Liselle here. I miss saying also that with IP projects, you can also end up auditioning for these. So your agent can try and find out about different IP projects that are going around or that like are existing. And some of these will have auditions. So they'll invite authors to basically send them sample pages, things like that for the story. And they will look over them and then they kind of choose an author that they think will best fit the project. And so this is another way that you can kind of get into IP projects in traditional publishing, is you can kind of ask your agent to, you know, keep an eye out for those for you and to let you know about those, or if any auditions are happening, and in that way you can also audition. And so that's another way that you can like get into the IP project thing without like being approached for IP projects. So I also wanted to say that. Yes, that is my last piece that I have to say on that. If you have any questions for me, you can put those in the comments and I will answer to the best of my ability, whatever I can answer. And yeah, look forward to that 5th and 6th book deal video. And like maybe by the time those are announced, maybe more, maybe 7th. Who knows? Fingers crossed. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!